you have probably heard me do the finance presentations before. I'm trying to do this one differently, again, because we're looking at a different level of discussion. And it's an example of a place where I can drill down anywhere you want to drill. I can go into rabbit holes beyond rabbit holes. Okay, so, but I'm going to try and approach this more from a standpoint of you already have a program. What things should you be looking at? Okay. All right. So let's talk about your budget, your revenue, expense, obviously, opportunity cost, because everybody has an opinion on that one, and return on investment, and then enhancing that performance. Your budget. The number one predictor of program closure is whether your program director knows his or her financials. That's my opinion. It's an informed opinion. I've seen it happen too many times. Now, in this day and age, we don't see as many closures because everybody needs doctors. But it's still happening, as demonstrated by Hahnemann. What's going on there? It's demonstrated by a teaching health center, program in Wichita, Kansas, and some other sites. It does, oh, and I forgot, Yakima Community Health of Central Washington. They aren't closing, but they had part of their funding. Hi. Okay. Anytime I get called into a program that is being closed, the first question I will ask a program director is, show me your financials. What are your financials? How are you doing financially? And then I inevitably get, I don't know. Okay? That which you don't watch, that which you don't measure. Okay? So for those of you in the room, know your numbers. Despite whether the hospital says we're not going to tell it to you, and that happens all the time with federally qualified health centers, know your numbers. Okay? How much do you make or lose per visit on your residency program? No, I don't know. Okay? You need to know. And as we start looking at more capitated models, APM models, that just becomes an even more challenging question to answer. But for now in California, when we're not doing that, you should know. Now that is also a function of what's your growth? Are you staying stagnant and taking patients from existing providers and pulling them over for the residency program? Or are you growing? And depending on the answer to that, it changes your financial picture. If you're growing, you have a better chance that you're going to break even on your residency program. If you're not, then you are probably going to be losing money on this program. What expenses are being attributed to your program? There is no universal general ledger on residency training. The closest we have gotten is the one that Candace started with the project, but then went over to HRSA. I was on the project the entire time. It's one that we developed for the Office of Management and Budget. That's the closest, in my opinion. Another one that's close is one that program directors and others do in the National Association of Program Director Development coursework. Okay? But there's no universal standard. This is the general ledger. These are the expenses we accept. These are expenses we don't accept. So electronic health records, is that an expense of the residency program? Yes, no. You know? Allocated overhead, is that an expense of the residency program? Yes, no. These things need to be answered. These things need to be known. If you're already in a program, you should be seeing the financials no less than quarterly, and it needs to be an agreed upon general ledger between the parties, between the hospital and you. So that, and I like to attach that agreed upon general ledger as part of your legal agreements. Okay? If you're not currently in a program, that's part of the process of getting ready, is to say, here's what the financials look like for the hospital and for us. And again, the agreed upon general ledger is part of the legal agreements, and you true up annually. And I only listed some of these questions, some of the questions that you should be knowing and looking at. How does your staffing compare to other programs of your size? Well, how are you supposed to get that information, right? And there really is no source. Honestly, there is no source. Once upon a time, I made a request to folks in the state at Oshkosh saying, could you gather that? And what I was told is it has to be legislated and the legislation. So, you know, I mean, it'd be cool. I'd love to see a database like that, but it doesn't exist. So you have to turn to people like me or other program directors or the listserv that exists for program directors and say, what's your staffing line? Okay. Who was it earlier who talked about having too few MAs? Mark. What's Mark? Talk about too few medical assistants. What is the ratio that you should be looking at in order to have a smooth flow in your clinic of medical assistants, right, per resident? What is your cost per resident? Okay, once we have an agreed upon financials, or agreed upon general ledger, what does it cost you per resident? I'm jumping ahead of myself here, but there's the work we did at GW. We came up with a 2017 number of 157,000 per mature program. Okay, that was one slice of data of a limited number of programs. The best number we have out there is a 2017 157,000 per resident. Judith Powell's at the University of Washington did another slice of data, the WWAMI programs. She got about 170,000. Again, mature programs, right? But you need to know what you're running. Is it going up or down? Honestly, with the exception of inflation, it should be going down because your startup is expensive. You're fully staffing up. But once you've got your full complement of residents in, your cost per resident should be going down, separating out inflation factors. What line items are on the page or off the page? That gets back to a uniform, agreed upon general ledger. What percentage of your revenue do you have control over as a program director? Do you have any control over the revenue? Okay. If you are an FQHC who is running a program, owning and operating your own program, but not doing it with teaching health center money, you're getting a pass-through from the hospital CMS funds, you have zero control other than what's in the legal agreement, right? Now, there are certain controls we can put in the contract language, but ultimately that's their money, right? And so at the end of the legal agreement, if they decide they don't want to fund you anymore, now what, right? So one wise move is to diversify the funding through Song Brown, Prop 56, things of that nature. And what would the clinic financial performance be without the program? So if the program was gone, what's the financial performance? Because you've got to look at the before-after. Particularly if you're going to answer the question, is this costing us money? So one of the things, you know, when I joined WIPFLi, I'm not an accountant, I'm not a CPA, I do a lot of finance work. But one of the neat things for me about joining WIPFLi is I suddenly have all these CPA people around me who like to crunch numbers in ways that make my head spin. And so they'll go down, they'll pull your cost report. They'll have you give them your audited financials. They'll pull your 990s. They'll take and tie them all together and then do a pre-post with the residency and say, okay, this is what your loss is due to the residency. Or just wrap one up yesterday, your profit due to the residency. Okay? It isn't always a loss. Urban myth is that you start a residency program and it's going to cost you money because of reduced visits. That is an urban myth. Okay. All right, I've probably done all my slides. So these are some kind of recent ones. The most recent one, obviously, is Hahnemann. Everybody's aware of the Hahnemann situation? Okay, Hahnemann, academic mecca, is closing. leaving Drexel University residents without a hospital. Now, I've dealt with these kind of situations many a time. It's my least favorite work to do because lives are involved. You get lots of crying residents. Okay, it stinks. 1,700 residents, I think it is. That's a lot of crying residents. Because suddenly they don't have a place to train. Well, lo and behold, Hahnemann's trying to work a transfer of their programs all over to a group called Tower and sell the slots. Okay. Now, I've been asked many a times, are CMS slots that a hospital have, are those worth anything? And I've always argued it's an asset, and I've had people really push back on me about that. But they are worth money, and they are in high demand right now if you can get your hands on them. And what this group Tower, who is saying that they want to buy the slots, clearly sees it the same way. Okay, so this is a precedent-setting thing right now, that one entity could sell its residency programs and slots to another entity. Yeah, blows my mind. But other examples of programs that have struggled, Wichita Falls, that's actually in Texas. They closed their program after about 40 years. They claim it's about money, but there's a backstory there as well, and it has to do with chaos and frustration in politics. Yakima, outstanding program, teaching health center, that's also funded by hospital CMS funding. And the hospital decided it wasn't going to fund anymore. Fortunately for Yakima, they diversified. And so they can keep the program growing because of the teaching health center funding. But if they didn't, who knows where they'd be right now. So we are in a state where we are very blessed, extraordinarily blessed. Like I think, and unlike any other state that I can think of, and I travel the nation, with the Prop 56 and Solid Ground funding. Okay. We have the ability to diversify, and that is wise. So on revenue, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on revenue because later this afternoon we've got our Prop 56 friends and we've got our Solid Ground friends presenting, right? And I'm not going to walk through because normally this is something that I do. You know, how do you calculate CMS funding? You know, again, I tried to hit a different level here. But this is all the funding that's out there, all the possibilities that you can look at for revenue. That doesn't mean you can take advantage of 100% of them. I mean, there are principles of double dipping that come into play. But have you looked at things? Okay? VA, as an example, they just finished up a funding opportunity, but they were literally begging for family medicine programs that they could put funding into. In California, if you're not aware of this, be aware of it. It's because of our friend Dean Germano up at Shasta Community Health, his peeps are over there, that we have language that says if a federally qualified health center or an RHC becomes a teaching site, it triggers a scope change. And I've had clients who say, I don't want that scope change. And that's fine. But it's an opportunity. I have another client who is basing all of their financials, right, on that plan. Okay. So if you're sitting without that, go look at that. Right? Those of you, let me hit inpatient. In this day and age, it's not the norm for a federally qualified health center to be doing inpatient work. Some of you, your physicians are, but a lot of you, they're not. And I will not say that it's necessarily wise to say, okay, I'm going to now start an inpatient service because the financials of that are going to be negative initially. But I also know residency programs that majorly make it bank because of this. So when you are mature and you've got faculty, and if you're in an environment where there is opportunity in the hospital, you got to look at the financials about that to potentially support your program. Okay. If the volumes are there and you can get the physicians, do it. Plus, there are regulatory expectations by ACGME that you're doing this. Your faculty are doing inpatient. If your hospital is getting CMS funds, they need to be paying you for your teaching costs. This is whether you are sponsoring the program or whether you are a continuity site. Now, those teaching costs may not be huge. The same place that was making a profit, their teaching costs were about, by year 3, about $500,000 a year. Not huge. Perfect. Perfect question. Most folks immediately go, oh, we get paid for their precepting time. No. Okay? Because when they are precepting, you are dropping a bill. Right? Let's say you're employing the doctor as a faculty member. That doctor is precepting and bills are dropping. So if the hospital pays you for that, you actually, and I'm not a lawyer, but I've been around enough of them to say that I would be concerned about kickback. Right? Because the hospital is not paying you something that is in addition with the assumption that they're going to get visits, potentially. So that's a really ugly one. Ugly path to go down, slippery slope to go down, and you're dropping bill, you're getting revenue. Why would you be paid for that? You can argue that you should be paid the fair market value of the teaching time of each visit. And I have done that before, and there are major hospital systems in this nation who do that, who pay that. So teaching costs, it's their educational admin time. It's the evaluation time, it's the mentoring time, it's sitting on clinical competency committee time, it's being part of the program evaluation time, it's interviewing resident time, it is sitting in ranking meeting time, it's all of that. Okay. That's rarely enough to cover your bottom line because chances are good, especially in year 1 and year 2, that you will be losing money in the FQ. Especially if A, you're already upside down in your cost per visit versus revenue per visit, and a lot of FQs are. And because in the first year, residents in family medicine see patients 1/2 day a week and 1 patient an hour. Really hard to make the math work on that. Okay. So you're going to ask the hospital for either mission support or community benefit grant to offset your losses due to the presence of this residency program. This is a negotiated piece. I can say you'll get 0. I can say you can get your full amount. It's all in the negotiation. But this needs to happen. The same client that I'm working with, and it's not a California client, so I can talk a little bit more openly about it, I think, no names. Started, it's looking at being a continuity clinic, and it's for 2 programs, and when it started its conversation with the sponsor, it quickly became apparent that the sponsor never thought that they were going to have to pay anything. Why would we pay anything? You get the revenue from the visit. Well, that ended really quick when I said, oh no, they must be paid. Because HRSA's not going to let you lose money on this. They're not going to be happy if they find out that you are now in a service line of teaching that results in financial losses that then take away access to the underserved, right? So that's your number one argument. HRSA's not going to let you. The other argument is they can post these costs on their cost report. Doesn't mean that I paid all of them. It just means they're going to want those teaching costs at the hospital. And then there's always, fundraising. which there's some folks who do a pretty amazing job with that, to be honest. Including, there is a group in the Central Valley that was successful in getting funding from CalViva. Significant funding from CalViva. Oh, my brain just went blank. The Health Plan Northern California, Natalie. Somebody help me. Partnership, thank you. They've been wonderful about doing funding for feasibility work and other pieces relating to residency programs. Because the health plans, they have their mandated buffer, whatever, fund that they have to keep. And when they start to get to the top of or over that fund, they need ways to invest it. And residency training is a great one. It's a win for everyone. All right. Can revenue be maximized? Well, first of all, have you pursued all those funding streams or some of those funding streams? And if not, why not? Right? Looking at our Shasta friends. You're 100% teaching health center and FQHC funded. Every time the teaching health center funds go, oh, and I'm sorry, Song Brown, you get Song Brown. And I don't know if you get Prop 56. I don't know. They do? Okay. So every time teaching health center funding goes like this, right? Marianne, you get Song Brown, you get, I don't know what you get.
Song Brown, and we got a small Prop 56, we're generous, smaller.
Right.
Prop 56 we were not.
And the rest of your funding comes from where?
We get, of course, hospital, Medicare, CMS funding. We actually have done pretty well on our inpatient. That sat there. That sat there for a long time, not really getting billed appropriately and such, but in the last probably 5 years, we've done well, and particularly on the OB side.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense.
So that, and it's interesting, I think, for, we have a hospital sponsorship, but I think it's the same, no matter who your sponsor is, if you are bringing in some other money, I think that goes a long way. That kind of seed money, or just you're offsetting some things, you know, and especially early on, we had AHEC funding too originally,
Sure.
as well. Again, smaller amounts of, they call it seed money, but also it can allow you to do things that are not revenue generating, right? So that, for instance, some of our work with outreach to the high schools or developing high school-based clinic, you can justify faculty time for that because, you know, because we've been, let's say, Song Brown, you know, pipeline mission and different things. So it's,
Yeah.
I think even bringing some extra money in is very, very helpful. I feel like you get more back than just what you bring in.
Right. I'm with you.
Goodwill and all of that.
There's a program director in Ukiah, Mimi Duan, and I worked with her to start that program. And before I ever got up there, she had started a nonprofit. Mimi's a high energy kind of lady, but she had started a nonprofit because of her connections and relationships. She had started an annual concert with Michael McDonald every year. And then a coffee company came in and labeled a coffee, started a coffee that funds the residency program. I'm like, my gosh, Mimi, where is this going to stop? Right? I'm just waiting for the, this is not happening, but I'm just waiting because it's sitting in Humboldt. I'm just waiting for residency weed. You did not get that idea here. Talk about revenue generating, right? We take that. Oh, sorry. That was so not cool, right? Not cool.
Very appropriate. We'll delete that part.
I'm not making that as a recommendation. Okay. This is another one. Are you accurately reporting on iris? Now, a bunch of you are sitting going, iris? What's iris? Okay. Iris is what the hospitals use to report how many residents you have. And it's done by the half day and by the rotation. Now, there are lots of nuances to that of things that won't be paid for by CMS. So if the resident is doing the didactics out in the clinic, not going to be paid for by CMS. If the resident is doing research on clinic stuff, not going to be paid for by CMS. So there's lots of stuff in here that, depending on how you're reporting on iris, you could be overstating or understating. And it's your residency software that's spitting out that iris report that then goes to the hospital. Absolutely.
The person, your Medicare, there's probably someone in administration that is sort of your expert in this area. And some people are much more transparent and sharing and what is doing. I think that's something that we have been fortunate with Scripps, and I think that made a difference, that the person who puts these final reports together and works with the CMS intermediary is really an advocate for education, and then is also very willing to share what is coming in because of the medical education program.
And that's really key. Go back to it's about the relationships.
Yeah.
A program director can't be there in isolation going, I don't need to know about, or I don't need to go meet the cost report person at the hospital. Oh, yes, you do. Because I guarantee you that person is probably not an individual who sits there and sees the value of what you're doing. Okay. They're sitting with the Federal Register, posting it as it's posted, or as it's required to be. And so Mary Ann, speaking of the relationship there and somebody who gets it and will share information, that's huge. Because you can hire a firm like ours or any other accounting firm that does cost report work. And we can go in, drive down and do the math and calculation and figure it out, what they're getting. But how does that play when you go into Main Street Hospital and say, I know you won't tell us what you're getting, so we went and hired somebody and we figured out you're getting X. That doesn't play. And that happens a lot. I often play monkey in the middle between the hospital, the medical school, and the FQHC. And when I do, I have had times when the hospital has said, you are not, we will show you our numbers, Kiki, but you are not to tell the FQHC what they are. What kind of partnership is that? You want transparency. And do not show them your numbers if they don't show you. Okay? Yeah.
Just to clarify, if you're a teaching health center, then you're not going to have any CMS funding.
Maybe. You could have some slots that are teaching health center and some slots that are CMS, but you cannot double dip. The HRSA CMS funding, or the HRSA, I'm sorry, teaching health center funding. You cannot double dip. On Song Brown, it is viewed as a grant. Okay, so we've got to be careful which teaching health center funds we are talking about. But if you're getting HRSA teaching health center funds, they will audit to make sure that if you say Ivan Gomez is one of our residents, that he's not then appearing on the hospital cost report. Growth due to growth of the family medicine practice side or where the internal medicine residents are is key to making this work as long as you don't lose money on every visit already anyway, right? I've had clients who sit there and go, but why does the bottom line keep getting worse? Because you're seeing more patients. Okay, you're getting more patients in, and you already lose $100 a visit. So losing more than more visits than $100 a visit makes it look worse, right? Okay. But that's common because a lot of FQHCs go to the place of, well, yeah, but our $330 grand pays for that. by the way, when you're doing your math when you are coming up with your general ledger with your partners, do not, under any circumstance, throw your 330 grant money in that bucket. Okay? Believe it or not, I have people who want to do. Expenses. We just hit all of the first one. I told you I've already done my slides. So we've done all of these. What is your precepting ratio? Right? Actually went in to do an audit of a residency program, which will remain nameless. And as I'm looking at their numbers, there were times when they had 2 preceptors to 1 resident. 10 minutes, okay. I'm like, inappropriate me, I said, well, it must be a really cute resident. But that's me because I'm highly inappropriate sometimes. Okay. The required Medicare is 1 to 4. I will model it at 1 to 3. Okay. What is your throughput per preceptor? You've got to look at how many patients does my average doctor put through? You know, we've got our expectations as FQHCs as to productivity. But once I start precepting, I as an individual am not doing that anymore. But I as an individual precepting 3 residents am seeing a lot more, right? But we've got to look at what your average physician throughput is, the fact that by the time our residents get to the end of year 2, they should be operating at that same level of throughput. Because, as I said, how does that compare when there's no residents? Okay, I've already gotten some, oops, typo. I already said that, something else. Opportunity cost. I already jumped ahead. Okay, true or false? Residency programs cost money due to decreased faculty productivity. True or false? It depends. It's an urban myth. It's an urban myth. Okay, it depends. Depends on your individual financials. True or false? You can manage the resident schedule in order to mitigate any lost revenue. Very end. You're sitting there and saying, I already had this conversation with a group or individual earlier. If you are the community, if you are the clinical site, continuity clinic site, I guarantee you there will be days when you're putting your head in your hands because, gosh darn it, I just got a call from the associate program director or the program director, and they changed the schedule and pulled the resident off clinic for tomorrow morning again and didn't backfill. Now, I've done contracts where there are penalties if that happens to protect the FQ, right? They can't backfill for you when they pull a resident, then they need to be paying for that. That gets their attention. Return on investment. It's honestly, truly all about retention. Access is critical, quality is critical. You've got the nice halo effect, which we cannot put dollars to. But it's really about retention. If you're not retaining your residents, then you're making this investment and not getting a return for it. Now, I can get very philosophical and talk about the benefits to the community, and I believe in that. But when you're looking at your board of directors, we could have a whole section just on retention. We're not going to do that. The return on investment calculation is primarily based on retention. Enhancing your financials, I'm cranking here, Erin, I'm cranking. All right, I mentioned some of this before, but when I'm called in to look at a program and how it is doing financially, which actually happens quite frequently, David, I didn't know you were going to be here when I did this slide. I'm laughing because David used to be with a different organization who actually called me to say what's our return on investment. And I've gotten a little more sophisticated because I wasn't with WIPFLi back then. Back then I didn't ask for, I didn't have access to your cost reports and all that. But We're going to pull any financial data we can get our hands on. We're going to interview key stakeholders, find out what they think's on the page. It's also where I get the color commentary, the things that I would not know from the black and white of the financials. I'm going to take what they think is on the page, like, I don't know. Why am I drawing a line? Let's take a 330 revenue. The hospital saying, we think their 330 revenue for their grant needs to be part of this calculation. Okay, and I've heard it more than once. Okay, I'm going to gather all of that, and then I'm going to get back to the group as to what is best practice, and we're going to come to consensus of what that general ledger looks like. From there, using that model, we're going to calculate your revenue, your expense, and your cash flow, and we separate out teaching from clinical. 5 minutes, teaching from clinical. There are teaching costs and there are clinical costs, and they need to be separated. We're going to calculate key metrics, we're going to calculate your opportunity costs, and we're going to look at your qualitative outcomes as well, because those are important, right? For example, a perfect is a qualitative and a quantitative outcome. If this program closes, we're going to, or if this program reduces in size, we're going to lose faculty. The only reason the faculty are here because of this program. Well, we got to take that into consideration. A, is it true? Or is it just the faculty members, stomping their feet a little bit? But in this day and age where there's a physician shortage, I've got to be really present to the fact that any doc can find a job like that. Okay? So if that's what the noise is, we've got to look at that and take that into consideration, because an FQHC suddenly losing its doctors is hardly then a good financial decision. And then we meet with key stakeholders, present the analysis and recommendations for improvement. When you look at the key metrics, retention, patient visits, half day, your revenue and expense, your FTEs per resident, how you are with the ACGME requirements. And Marianne won't, well, I don't know what Marianne will say to this, but there are plenty of program directors who will sit there and go, these are the requirements. I must have 20,000 square feet, including a swimming pool, because I must have it. And I can tell you how many people never pull down the requirements, go, or read them, and go, I don't see the swimming pool. I'm exaggerating here, right? But you know program directors who do that, right? Yeah. Yeah. And so when I come in, I sit there and go, this thing, not a requirement. That thing, not a requirement. It's good to have, or you don't need it at all, or for what you're doing, it makes sense. But we've got to know what are requirements and what are not requirements before we decide if this is making money or not. That's the truncated improving your financial performance. Questions before Erin gives me the hook. Erin's shaking her head.
Well, I don't know if the group wants to hear this, but I wanted to understand a little more about if you're going to have, like, some of your residents CMS funded and some are teaching health centers versus all one or the other. So I don't know.
Yes, no? Okay. I'm going to start off with, it's complicated, okay? Because you want to make it a little more complicated. You're talking about, if you're doing that, you're doing it most likely with a hospital that's not set its GME cap and you are in cap building years. So you need to be strategic so that you have as many residents as possible on the cost report in year 5 of the hospital when they set their cap. And yet, you also want to fill all of your THC slots. So at a different time, some things were easier back then. I'll use Valley Consortium for Medical Education as an example. 10, 10, and 10 program, I've got a clean hospital cost report, and they got teaching health center funding. Okay. We strategically figured out where on year, back then it was in 3 years, where at year 3 all residents would be. I told folks, I swear, we're going to duct tape them to the chairs in the hospital so we can count them. And then we kept separate and said, okay, Dr. Jones, you are a teaching health center resident, never to show on the CMS books. So we had both going on, and we were very intentional about how we did it so that we didn't violate any entity's rules, but had some of both. I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, I want a bigger picture of who would do one, who would do the other, what scenarios
Okay.
would you, like as an FQHC, why would you prefer one or the other? What would you try to achieve?
Okay. Let's start with the second question. As an FQHC, would you prefer CMS funding or THC funding? Pros and cons. CMS funding has been around a long time. There we go. Been around a long time. And you have zero control over it. So when the hospital CEO says, you know, I think we have enough family docs, I think we're going to use those slots for general surgery, you no longer have your funding. Okay? That's the downside. The other downside is with CMS funding, where the resident is physically at any given moment matters. So let's say you want to do a global health experience in Africa for a rotation. Medicare's not going to pay for that. Right? THC funding, HRSA, THC funding. It comes to you, the FQHC, or the consortium of which you are a major part of. You now are in control because you are sponsoring the program and you are getting the money. You can send them anywhere and you're still going to get the same money. You can send them to South America. You can send them to Africa. You can send them to the Pacific Rim. You can send them anywhere. That's really cool. And you don't have to worry about what kind of research they're doing. It's painful. The downside, we've had 2 years of funding and 2 years of funding. And now we're hoping for 5 years of funding. That's the downside. So how you make your decision, you're looking at, do I have a hospital that is capped or not capped? If they are not capped, I personally think it's pretty irresponsible to get 100% teaching health center funding because you are still triggering their cap by stepping foot in their doors. Okay? And we don't have time for me to dive down into the details of that. The bottom line is you are messing them up if your residents walk in and are educated in their facility when they can't claim any of those costs because it's double dipping.
That's my first question. We're not really intimately involved, but just going in town. So community health, let's say there's a teaching health center whose residents rotate at a hospital in town for their inpatient family medicine service.
Mm-hmm.
Now, so that hospital can, it sounds like, that hospital cannot claim any CMS hospital.
Correct. If they are versus THC funded residents. Correct.
So, and that's for direct or indirect.
Correct. And if they are, my belief is at this point it will be found out because HRSA's done too many audits.
But it does count as a cap.
I'm telling you, well, it will trigger their cap.
Right.
Their per resident amount, we said 0 on direct. Their indirect is going to, it creates a hot mess. That's why you want to separate it out and go, okay, these residents we're going to use in the trigger cap, and we're going to get funding for these residents from THC. The easiest thing with THC is to work with a hospital that's already capped. And believe it or not, there are hospitals out there that have a cap of 1.58. Let's go work with those.
What does that mean, Catholic? When do you go to a Catholic?
So back in 1997, think back to Council on Graduate Medical Education issuing a report saying, oh my God, we have too many doctors. And we put a kibosh on training by saying it was actually in 1997, that Balanced Budget Act, that all hospitals will be capped at the number of FTEs they are training on their 1996 cost reports. And the only, so if I'm Main Street Hospital and I'm training 100 residents in 1996, and it differs between direct and indirect, so I'm really generalizing here, I will only forevermore be paid for 100 FTEs. That's it. The only way it can add break. I know the only way that can be added is if I start a rural program or if I affiliate or, there's math. Hospitals that had a cap of 0 are the only ones that we can create programs for and get CMS to pay them. And then current law is that in their 5th year of training, they become capped as well. There are so many things I'm leaving out there, but that's what I mean by capped. You are sitting in an area where everything is capped, except for John Muir that's building this capped. Okay, she's going for the hook. She's going for the hook. Any other questions that I could quickly answer before I get in trouble because I'm taking a break? Or you can grab me during the break. All right, Fun with Finance is over.